If I had your hand, I'd throw away mine. Get on big time. Shines ain't but a dime. Shine 'em up. I looked down at my stomps. They could stand a gloss all right. I followed the pointing, gnarled finger to the dwarf's open-air stand. It sat at the mouth of a gangway between two buildings. The red fringes of its tattered canvas top rippled in the breeze. I climbed into the chair. The dwarf was slapping polish on my Stetsons. A thin stud with at least $500,000 in threads on his back took the other chair. He was wearing silver nail polish. He was reeking with perfume. A gleaming black custom Duesenberg eased into the corner in front of me. The top was down. My peepers did a triple take. A huge stud was sitting in the back seat. He had an ocelot in his lap dozing against his chest. The cat was wearing a stone-studded collar. A gold chain was strung to it. He was sitting between two spectacular high yellow whores. His diamonds were blazing under the streetlight. 3 gorgeous white whores were in the front seat. He looked exactly like Boris Karloff in blackface. He was rapping something. All 5 of those whores were turned toward him. They were listening and paying attention like he was God giving them a pass to heaven. He could have been running down a safe place to hide because the world was coming to an end. I said, "Who is that?" The dwarf said, "You gotta be from out of town. That's Sweet Jones. He's the greatest nigger pimp in the world." The thin joker said, "That spotted cat, Miss Peaches, is the only bitch he cares lives or croaks. Shit, them whores you penning ain't but half the stable. If they got nigger pimps in outer space, he's the best of them too. He's gonna take them whores into the roost and pop some. He's lugging 20 G's in his rays. Ain't no heist man crazy enough to stick 'em up, though. He croaks niggas for his recreation." I couldn't believe what I saw. This was only 1938. Those Duesenbergs cost a fortune. He must have been the only black pimp in the country who owned one. My peepers jacked off just watching him and those high-powered whores. It was as exciting as maybe Christ making his encore. The dwarf had shined my stomps. I gave him $1. I sat there and watched Sweet Jones and those whores get out of the Duesenberg and walk toward the roost. The black-spotted cat slinked beside him. I thought, tonight I got to cut into him. I got to be careful so I don't blow him. The cut-in has to be in the roost. I'll go in and cook something up in there. I got off the stand. I passed Poison's problem whore. She was sitting beside a joke and a red hog. She had a bottle of gin in her jib turned straight up. As I neared the roost, I saw old Preston trying to shoot 2 marks into the Greek's joint. Just as I turned into the roost, he bucked his eyes and jerked his thumb at me. He was tipping me Sweet was in the roost. I nodded my head and went in. It was an off night for the combo. The jukebox was grinding out pennies from heaven. The joint hadn't crowded yet. There were maybe a half-dozen couples in the booths. Sweet Jones and his whores were the only people at the log. They were in the center. The cat was licking her paws beneath Sweet's stool. I sat at the log near the front door facing him and the stable. The pretty Mexican broad was standing in front of him. Sweet was buying the house a drink. She served his party. She glanced at me. She remembered my drink. She brought me a Planter's Punch on Sweet. The floor waitress loaded a tray from the log and served the couples in the booths all on Sweet. I sat there studying Sweet. He had to be 6'6". His face was like a black steel mask. Not a flick of emotion played over it. He kept smashing the heels of his brute-sized hands together like he was crushing an invisible throat. Even at a distance, it made me edgy. I guess it kept his whores on the brink of peeing on themselves. If he had smiled, maybe they would have dropped dead from shock. He sure proved pimping wasn't a charm contest. Those whores lit his cigarette. They took turns feeding him sips of his coke. They fought to ram their noses up his ass. I froze. One of the white broads was whispering in his ear. Those unearthly gray eyes of his in the ebony sockets were staring at me. I could hear the thud of those meat sledges. I thought, Christ almighty! Mama darling, I hope my double hasn't put the muscle on this broad for some snatch or scratch. Please don't let this broad bum finger me. He slid his terrible pearl gray peepers off me. I saw him pound the bottom of his glass against the log. The Mexican broad expressed to him. He was rapping to her. She was nodding her head and looking down the log at me. My Stetsons on the stool rung were slamming together like the heels of a flamenco dancer. The jukebox was sobbing Lady Day's beef about her mean but sweet man. I wondered if I'd see the run again, and if not, how soon she'd get another ass kicker. The couples in the booths were bug-eyeing the arena. It was maybe like the Circus Maximus, the doomed Christian, me, pitted against the king of beasts, him, plus the ocelot. The Mexican broad came slowly toward me. Her face was tight and serious as she stood before me. She had pity in her peepers. She hated capital punishment. She said, "Mr. Jones wants you to come to him pronto." She turned and walked away. I staggered to my feet. I started hoofing that 1,000 miles to Mr. Jones. On the way, I dusted off the 175 IQ in my skull. I got to him. The cat snarled under the stool. It pasted its yellow eyes on me. I jerked my eyes away from the cat and kept them riveted to the floor. I was afraid to look into Sweet's glowing peepers up close. I knew I'd crap my pants. He whirled around on his stool, his back to the log. I glued my peepers to the tapping tips of his needle-toed patent leather stomps. I flinched at each crash of his huge hooks. He whispered, "Nigga, you know who I am? Look at me when I'm spieling to you." That teletype in my skull hammered out the escape hatch. It read, "For this maniac, you gotta be just like a Mississippi nigga. You gotta pretend he's a white lynch mob leader. You gotta con him, but be careful. Don't get cute. Keep your nose square in his ass. Jeff it out all the way." I said, "Sure I know who you are, Mr. Jones. You're the black god of the sporting world. Ain't a nigga alive unless he's stupid and deaf that ain't heard your fame and name ring. The reason I don't look at you is because I remember what happened to that sucker in the Bible that snitched a peep." His whores broke out into gales of laughter. Miss Peaches wasn't a lady. She broke wind and grinned. Those patent leather toes stopped tapping. Could I be selling it? He reached out and grabbed my chin. He held my head up and cupped it in his giant hook. I flexed my belly to take up the slack in my bowels. Those deadly gray slits almost slugged me into a dead faint. When he opened his jib, I saw spidery webs of spit for an instant bridge to his fat lips. He said, "Little nigga, who are you and where you from? You kinda look like me. Maybe I laid your mammy, huh?" I neatly sidestepped his booby trap. I said, "Mr. Jones, I'm nobody trying in your world to be somebody. I was born right here in your town. Could be my mammy went for you. What bitch wouldn't? If I was a bitch, I'd give you some scratch to get some." He said, "Nigga, you like fine white pussy? This dog of mine wants you to lay her. I give my whores what they want. You gonna lay her for a double saw?" My skull raced out of the warning. "Fool, watch your ass." I said, "Mr. Jones, I don't want no kind of pussy unless it hangs on my own whore. Mr. Jones, I'm a pimp like you. I don't want nothing but some pimp scratch. My principles won't let me turn no reverse trick. Mr. Jones, I ain't no party freak. I want to be great like you. I ain't never going to amount to anything if I screw up the rules of the pimp game. You the greatest pimp on earth. You got great pimping by the rules. Would you want a poor dumb pimp like me to chump out at the start? His freak white woman pouted at his side. She begged Nero to flip his thumb down. She said, "Mr. Jones, make this pretty punk freak off with your baby. You don't let nobody say no to you. Since he's dreaming he's a pimp, it will be wild kicks for me. Force him, Daddy. Force him. Show him who's boss. Sick Miss Peach is on him." He shoved her aside. The boa constrictor uncoiled from around my chest. I saw contempt paint over the skull and crossbones in his peepers. I drew a deep breath. He roared, "You little pissy green-ass nigger. You a pimp? You can't spell pimp. You couldn't make a pimple on a pimp's ass. Nigga, I'll blow your head off through that ceiling. Don't let the word pimp come out of your jib in my presence. Now get out of my face, pussy. I ought to stick my swipe in your jib." The cat slithered from under the stool. She crouched on her belly and stared up at me. I wasn't David. Good thing I wasn't. I was sure mad at the kooky bastard. I grinned and fished a fin out. I tossed it on the log and dragged Tail out of the door to the street. I was glad I hadn't stacked that slingshot switchblade in my pocket against that .38 Magnum stuck beneath Goliath's belt. The door smacked Preston a hard shot in the forehead. He had been peeping through a slat in the door blind. He rubbed his head. He looked scared. He said, "Kid, I told you he's nuts. You keep it up,